Hello everyone, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're having a look at a 17-year-old named Sorvino, and this is Ylva, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, not exactly sure, I might have that a little bit wrong, but anyway, this horse is 17 years old, has had some chronic swelling problems of his legs and joint problems and things like that, and she says she's already made a great deal of progress with him, that he was very ewe-necked when she started the work, and he's gotten rid of that. And I say everything I see here, this horse is really on a good track. So you're doing a really good job here with the work in hand. I'm liking this a great deal. It's just about right. But we can see when we look at this horse, when he comes around the corner here, you can kind of get a good look at his back. You can see that his hips are a little bit tented there. You see that bump on top of his hips and that sort of drop away from that bump, just in front of it there. As you come into his lower back and loins, and you can see his little drop right behind the withers there. So this horse's back it's a good thing you're doing what you're doing, because he was well on his way to probably developing kissing spine and other problems that happen when horses lose their backs. But you're off to a good start here. And once again, it's great that you're doing this work at 17. He looks like he's got a lot of good years left in him. If you do this work correctly, you should be able to keep him going for a long time. And what I'm seeing here so far looks really good. I'm not seeing any major problems, very even, nice big step stretching into it. So you've done a really lot of good work up to now. Good in your leg yield here as it starts to step over a little bit. Good there, right there, good. And that's very normal. He got a little bit excited there for a second, but dropped right back into the stretch. That could have had a little more step over and a little more even. Obviously, he resisted a little bit there, bringing his head up and kind of disengaging on you there for a moment. But you got him right back into the stretch afterwards, and that's what's important. I like the big step he has. Little shoulder forward here, and that's looking pretty good. Now, of course, we'd like to keep him stretched as much as we can into this, but that's not bad at all, and he's keeping the step pretty regularly behind, a little bit slow and go. But once again there, you can see his back, you can see what I'm talking about, the tented hips, there's kind of a bump on top of his hips there. All those things are caused by the horse not generating energy from behind and pushing itself, rather than, as you said, he had a pretty big ewe-neck, and you've done a good job of getting rid of that. I didn't see that, so if he's come this far with you, you've done a good job. That was, as I said, that was a pretty good shoulder fore over on that other side. And remember when we're doing these things, perfection is something that's out there, but, if you get a little bit and it gets better each time. So we're never trying to make, well, we would like everything to be perfect every time, but it's never going to be. So we have to learn to accept that we're headed in the right direction, that we're getting some good things, and notice as we do whether they're getting better or not. If you come out every day and you find you still have that little resistance to the leg yield, then you may need to alter how you do that a little bit. A good practice of that is to start the leg yield as you come around the corner before you start it. So you're already kind of taking the centrifugal force of the turn that tends to want to make them go to the outside, and you're kind of using that to help you get started. So you can see here in the shoulder fore, once again, wasn't quite able to do that, but it's improving here as you're going. So always remember, it's better to have less angle and more correct connection across the top line than it is to have a big wide angle and the horse losing the rhythm. Losing rhythm tells us everything. Towards the end of that got pretty good. He started to relax into it and still keep somewhat of a forehand in the advance there. Excuse me. So all that was really very good, and especially just your part of just going straight. So he's got that really quite good and stretching into it. Just keep working on those. I would do a lot more leg yields. He doesn't look quite ready to do much of that shoulder fore yet. I would stick with your leg yields. So you get those really good. Not that you can't try the shoulder fore, you certainly can. But once again, if you find that it's not great yet, go back and work on just the leg yield, and that should help you improve that. Then when you go back to the shoulder four, as the horse begins to listen and can keep that long frame that is stretched into it and create the position of shoulder four. That's what we're looking for. But this is all very good. So your basic work, I mean, he's engaging nicely here in this. His top line is working. Everything we would like to have happen here is happening. Once again, he comes up against the hand a little bit like that, but he pretty much immediately stretches back into it and gets you back where you want to be. That's really good. Now see, that's where you want to start your leg yield, right there. As you come around that corner, and that's much better this time. There you go, like that. That's what we're looking for. So he wants to keep stretching into it because we're looking for that place. I mean, the point of doing the leg yield is to get the horse to push up through the back with the inside hind leg. So if all they do is go sideways and you don't achieve that push up to the back, well, you haven't really done much. That's more like something we would use, for instance, the old turn on the forehand to open and close gates and things like that, where you're not really, or some people don't pay attention to the bend of the horse or whether the back is up or not. They're just asking the horse to move over sideways. So everything is a little easier, obviously, in this direction. That's a really nice leg yield there. That kept the rhythm quite nicely, and he stretched into it by the end of it, so that was really good. You got a really good leg yield that time. So once again, every horse starting out, until their back is up, they're always a little different on one side than the other. Remember that only when a horse's back comes up are they really able to bend. And when I talk about bend, we're talking about the bend right at the base of the withers where we sit under our seat bones. That's where we want a horse to bend, not in the neck. So even very advanced horses don't bend all that much when you consider the length of the horse. So it's not like, they're bent or, like curved into a U shape or something. They don't ever bend that much. So much better in your shoulder four here in this. That's really quite good. And once again, he didn't go so hollow on you in this direction. So you got a little bit of work to get it. Now he's beginning to drop a little activity there. See how the short leg of the hind leg is kind of beginning to drop back a little bit, not taking that long active step. So that's okay, but as soon as you come back to this, immediately stretch him back out again and get that inside hind leg working. So our goal in all your lateral work is that there to be no change in the gait, that the rhythm stays exactly the same, that the horse doesn't shorten up behind or when you start them. But just keep working on that. It takes time. It won't be near perfect until the horse can really lift its back up. That's what enables it to really step under the body. So when you encounter that difficulty of stepping sideways, the horse is having trouble lifting its back. But once again, I like this. When you come back to this, you could do a lot of this. So to say, we can do a lot of walk. You can come out here and walk like this for an hour or two if you wanted to. The trot and the canter we have to be much more careful with. But the walk, once we get a good walk, we can do a lot of that. So this is all really good. As I said, all you're going to do is just in the future, that's really, really nice shoulder four right there. Now see how he kept the rhythm and stayed over his back that time. Now that was really good. That's what we're looking for. Got a little slow there, just kind of started to lose it here at the end. See how the hind leg is starting to take a short step again. So right there is where you'd want to, which is what you do, reactivate him and get him back into the stretch again. Good work there. So we always want to be able to stretch all the way down. And then, of course, you were asking me later, do I think he's ready to come up in your paragraph that you wrote to me about him, asking whether he's ready to come up into a working frame in the walk yet. And from what I see here, now remember, you're going to do that first from the ground. So when he's ready to come up into a working walk, all you're going to do is do just what you're doing here and shorten the reins and bring his pole up a little bit, which he's almost doing right there. But you see how his hind leg is starting to fall out behind when he does? So that tells me he's not quite ready to be that high in the head and neck yet. So I think this horse has a little developing to go. Once again, looking at him standing here, you see those tented hips and that kind of drop at the base of the back. You can see that his belly is kind of distended. He's not really coming up as nice through the core as we would like him to do ultimately. So I think you're on your way, but I don't think he's quite ready. Once again, as I said, when he's ready to do the working walk, you'll do it from the ground first. All you do is shorten your reins and ask him to come up a little bit in the pole and see if he can maintain it. If he can't, now of course some of that can be you're being good at it. I mean, how good you are as you practice this, but it gets easier and easier. When the horse can do something, it will do it something. When the horse is physically developed to do something, it will do it quite easily. So if they're still struggling, you still have a little bit of work to do, or a lot of work to do, as the case may be. But I think this horse is in quite good shape. I'm not seeing anything here about this horse that worries me. I mean, everything that you've done so far looks quite good, as does most of the rest of it. I obviously have watched all of this before I'm talking to you about it. So even your lunging work here looks quite good. Keeping the stretch. You can see how he wants to be a little bit hindquarters to the inside. So that's where you'd want to just get a little closer to him on your lunge. That means you have to walk more with him so you can keep him on a big circle. Just gradually try to yield those hindquarters a little more and a little more to the outside. Because remember, that's always what we're trying to do, is engage that inside hind leg. We have to do it one side at a time. Once the horse learns to lift its back, then we can engage the horse going in a straight line. But in the beginning, it's much easier to use the bend and get that inside hind leg to start pushing the back up. Really good here. Now, once you get that little bit stretched, what you just want to see is this really quite good. No major problem. See how the underside of his neck stays nice and relaxed, and we're always looking at that as a good indication of whether or not he's pulling or pushing. For those of you watching this, I mean, if you see a horse with a big underside of its neck, it means one thing. It means the horse is pulling itself along by its shoulders. And many of the horses that you see today working in what they're calling dressage now, which is this exaggerated thing where horses are throwing their legs all over the place, the hind legs are out behind them, the front legs are throwing straight up and forward, Of course, what we should know is how disastrous that is to the body of the horse when you ride like that. That we're seeing in the show ring today is much closer to saddlebred riding in Tennessee walkers than it has anything to do with dressage. If the horse has no rhythm, rhythm is the hallmark of good dressage. When you see, and I'm not talking about frantic rhythm. Very often people are confused or blinded by the fabulous movement of some of these fabulous horses today, because the legs are going everywhere. Just like a Tennessee walker looks impressive to people who don't know what they're looking at, which is just a hollow horse going along on its front end. But my point is, many of those horses, when you see them all bent over, they look like out the top line, but when they let go of the reins, you see that there's this big underside of the neck. So that tells you. You can see here when he goes into the canter, the neck comes up a little bit. It's a little bit like he's in the break, so you don't want to do too much of that canter till the horse. Remember, the canter is very hard on the horse's leg, so a little bit of canter just to activate the horse at this point. But as long as they have that look like they're kind of putting the brakes on, where he came up and you can see that underside of his neck start to come out, he shouldn't be doing too much of that at this point. But what you're getting here in the trot is pretty good. What I'd like to see is once you get that, it's just to keep working for that little more swing so he starts to push himself off the ground. Remember, that's what happens in working gaits. What we're looking for and what collection is the degree to which the thrust of the hind legs lifts the whole front of the horse up into the air, not just lifting their knees. The horses we're seeing today, we're seeing them like a saddlebred or Tennessee walker. They're just lifting their knees up. They're not swinging through and lifting their whole body off the ground. That's what we want to see. That's what real collection is. It has nothing to do with how high a horse lifts its knees. So we always want to see that swing through the horse. So when a horse is really collected, we just see a lifting of the forehand. The knees may come a little higher, but it's relative to everything else. That is, there would be more lift in the entire body off the ground, not just how high the knees go. But all this is really good. I like how you're coming back very often to the walk, which is what you want to do at this point. We don't want to keep the trot or canter going for very long. We want to get some good steps, come back, let him walk again. That's what you're doing. Now, generally speaking, when you're talking about the next lesson, you were going to show me the horse under saddle. And just know that, until a horse is in working gaits, everything we do is about strengthening them so they can be, because we don't do a lot of riding on the back of a horse until they have working gaits, until they can lift us up and carry us correctly. So we get on, we ride, we do a little bit, and we see what's possible, but we don't want to keep riding a horse that can't lift us up. So we get on to check it out, do the best we can, see what happens, but if the horse cannot maintain that position over its back with us, then we know we have more groundwork to do to get ready for that to happen. It's kind of like, if you were building a car in your garage, you wouldn't try to drive it till you'd put a motor in it and put brakes on it. Well, horses are the same way. You're not going to do much driving until they're steerable and they have the shock absorbers on and the engine, which is the back end. And of course, think of the drive shaft as kind of the horse's back, if you will, that keeps everything coming together. But this horse, and that's the good news about this system of working horses, that it doesn't matter how old they are. In fact, older horses need to do this more than younger ones, obviously. But we want to start this young so the horses will work correctly their entire lives and live a long, happy life. But once again, it doesn't matter how old they are. If they've never been trained correctly, they've never developed their top line, they will, and they'll change, their bodies will change dramatically. And things like what you were having, like lymphitis and things like this, where the horse's legs are swelling and this kind of thing, all of this will be improved by this. And once again, this is not a bad canter. It's just it could have a little more swing through the back to it. And once again, that's about all you'd want to do of it at that level. That was really good. And look how it comes back into the stretch. That's more like the swing we're looking for there. So that's why you always have to remember that, our goal is not to stretch the horse. Our goal is to engage the back. The stretch just helps us do that. So the stretch comes when we get the back activated correctly and the horse starts to push up. The stretch comes very naturally, as you see. It doesn't take anything to hold the horse in the stretch once the horse actually learns to move correctly, which you have done here. So this horse has figured out how to change that. But once again, see, we take this picture of him. Once again, look at the hips. Look how dropped he is right at the base of the withers. You're going to want to see that coming up a lot more than you see here before you're going to do a lot of riding. Now, at this stage, you have the side reins connected up at the very top, and he seems to deal with it pretty good, but you could just lower. There's no need for them to be up there at this level. So we put them up on top like that when we're starting to bring them up. Now, he seems to be handling that very well, but your question is, were they a little too short? And maybe they are there because he does tend to curl back a little bit. So just drop those down to about the length you have here is good, but just drop them down to one of the lower rings on your surcingle there. See how much you've had to add. It's so hard these days to buy equipment because everything is made for people who tie their horses' chins to their chests with side reins. So everything is made so short. Reins are made too short these days. Side reins are made too short. That's not bad there, but we'd like to see that's not quite enough swing. He's kind of dropping his head down, but we want to see a little more swing that. He's still kind of pulling with his shoulders there a little bit. So once you get in that position, you just want to get that little bit more like that. There you go. Now that looks better right there already. So you're recognizing when it's right and when it's not. So that's good. I find it really fun to look at horses. I look at horses every day. I study how their backs are changing, how their mental attitude is, how everything is changing. Observe your horses. So this is why we want to do this one. As I said, I think you need to do quite a bit more, not quite a bit, but a bit more groundwork. As you said, he's already developing quite nicely, and this horse is engaging nicely over his back. I don't see any major resistance or any problems with him doing any of this. He seems to be gathering it, getting it rather quickly. So once again, what I would suggest at this point with him, those side reins, is just drop them down onto a lower rung, and then they would be about quite the right length for him right now, because we would like him to stretch on down a little bit deeper as he can. Once again, when we're waiting for them to come up to the back, we want that stretch to be as deep as we can get it. We don't want anything sort of interfering with their desire to swing through from behind. A nicer walk there, got like a bigger step. You can see him flexing his hocks more. That's what we're looking for. And once again, when you see him come around the corner there, we can see how his flanks are kind of still a bit distended. He's not coming up through his entire core as much as we would like him to do, which he will do in time. You know, the good news here is that you've gotten this far, so you're well on your way. This horse will just continue to improve as you just keep doing what you're doing here. But right there, he's a little bit behind your leg. I'd like to see a little bigger swing, and that may be help, you know, when you get a little bit longer. It's just a little bit short in those side reins. And there you can see kind of slowing down. We want to get a little more swing. So when you start to see more bend in the knee, you know the horse is not swinging through. So when the horse swings through its back, then we see the leg straighten more. We see that front leg swing more in a more straight kind of way with less knee action. Getting a little better there. So that's all really good. As I said, the thing I would change here is just put those side reins down on the next rung lower on your surcingle there, just to give him a little more room at this point. Because you want to get that really consistent. You want to, before you start trying to go in the other direction into working gaits, we got to be sure that we have really good rhythm in the walk and trot here in these gaits, or in this frame rather. Nice. I see how, you know, you influence him well. As you're right there, use your whip, and he starts to step up more actively. So he definitely gets what you're doing here. And as I said, everything is going correctly here. Once again, when you get into that trot, you see how he's just a little bit laboring on his front end there a little bit. You just want to kind of encourage a little bit more like you do right there, and then he starts to swing a little better. But yes, definitely could use that little bit longer side rein here. It gets a little better there. You get after him a little bit, but he could definitely use a little bit longer side rein in this position, just till you start to see that hind leg come under a little bit more than he's doing here. You're doing a really good job with this. I think you've come a long way just on your own. So really good work. Once again, just backing up, a couple of things to remember. Not so much shoulder four. Work those leg yields more until you get those more fluent without any change in the body of the horse or rhythm. Then start doing more of your shoulder four work. In this lunging, the only thing here is I would just lengthen those side reins by just dropping them down onto the lower rung here on your surcingle. But he's definitely got the right idea here and will continue to improve. The hardest thing about training horses is having the patience to wait for their bodies to change. And the more you do this, the more you observe your horse, the more patient you will be, because you'll start to notice all these little changes. As I say, you've already seen that with his neck, so good job. So I can see that you have a good understanding of this. I see you, trying to make him more active when necessary. That's it. Just needs that little bit longer neck so you can get that trot to swing a little more, because I think that's what's stopping you a little bit. And it's kind of short striding here a little bit, so we want to see a bigger stride. But he's also, once again, that's what happens when the side reins are too short. They don't move through behind. So great job here. I really look forward to seeing where you go with this. I look forward to seeing the next one. Great job, and we'll see you in the future. Keep up the great work. Once again, that's a great place to stop because you can see how he looks.